If you clicked on this video, you're probably wondering why anyone would move to China during this turbulent time. I've also had that same question, and I posed it to a couple of people that I've reached out to on YouTube to find out why they would move here during this turbulent time. Obviously, in the last 3 years, we've seen many articles about people leaving China, but we haven't really seen that many about people moving to China. So I wanted to ask a few questions about why they moved here, what were some of the reasons for them moving here, what was some of their responses in terms of media coverage in their own country, did that affect their decision to move here, how did their family and friends respond to their decision to move to China. And so I'm going to ask them a series of questions to find out more, and at the end I'll share a little bit of my thoughts, my personal thoughts about living in China and about whether or not Yvonne and I will stay long term. The first thing I obviously wanted to know is, why did you move to China during the pandemic?
Hello, I'm Anne.
And I'm Lucas.
We are German engineers and have been living and working in Suzhou for 1.5 years now.
Right at the beginning of 2021, I was offered a very interesting job opportunity here in China. I was already living in Suzhou in 2017 and thought it would be a wonderful opportunity and adventure to come back, both from professional and cultural perspective.
Hi, I'm Harvey, I'm from the UK, and after accepting a job in China during the peak of the pandemic, I've been living here for just over a year now. I had a few reasons for moving. Firstly, being in the UK during the pandemic really wasn't ideal. You couldn't go anywhere and you couldn't see anyone. The UK suffered terribly, and now they've pretty much given up on the pandemic, choosing instead to pretend that it doesn't exist. China, on the other hand, implemented and still to this day maintain a zero COVID policy. Despite a few flare-ups, overall it has worked pretty well to protect the health of the population. Although it's incredibly difficult to leave and re-enter China, especially as a foreigner, it is considerably easier to travel within the country's borders. And seeing as the country is literally as expansive as a continent, it is a traveller's dream. So part of the reason for me wanting to move to China was because I wanted to travel during the pandemic, but couldn't whilst in England. Reason 2 is because this is my girlfriend's home. We met whilst at university in the UK, and when her student visa ran out, she had to move back to China. So here I am.
Hello, I'm Alessia. I'm an international student at Shanghai International Studies University. So since I am studying for my last year of university, I wanted to do it here. I didn't want to continue to having online classes. And also after graduation, I would love to stay here in China, work in China. So these are like the two main reasons for me coming back to China.
It's interesting to hear everyone's story and reason for moving to China, but I also wanted to know what was their biggest concern when they decided to move to China.
My biggest concern when moving to China wasn't actually anything to do with the pandemic, because I knew from people within the country that they literally had it under control. So it was nothing to worry about. My biggest concern was actually to do with the language. Now, I didn't know any Mandarin whatsoever. However, after learning a couple of sentences, and with the help of modern day translation apps and the friendliness of Chinese people, it really isn't that much of a barrier to having an easy life here.
Our biggest concern was the long quarantine. At that time, both of us needed to do 2 weeks of hotel quarantine plus an additional 2 weeks at home. And knowing that you will be isolated for such a long time without speaking the language definitely makes you overthink your choices.
We were as well contemplating when we will be able to see our family and friends again, and we have not so far.
I believe for me the biggest concern was documentation, because since when you arrive, even like before arriving to China, you have to prepare a lot of documents like the COVID test certification. You have to, get the visa, then you arrive to China and you have to get the resident permit, and then, there are a lot of health codes that you need to get. So if you don't have some documentation, or if you do things wrong, then it's a little bit of a problem. So I was pretty much concerned about this, but fortunately, everything went well because, I can speak Chinese. So if I have any question, I can, directly ask. But I believe that if you don't speak Chinese, it is pretty much harder.
If you've been following the news, you've probably seen a lot of negative stories and videos about China and the lockdowns here. So I wanted to know, did the media play into their decision to move to China?
Generally, I think there's a very one-dimensional picture drawn in Western media that does not necessarily depict reality in all circumstances. But as I have already been in China, media did not influence our choices at all.
Now, obviously, as we all know, the media in different parts of the world like to tell different stories. Each country has their own degree of xenophobia and their own interests to protect. The UK and the US have ruled the world for arguably the last 2 centuries. My opinion is that the old empire is slowly crumbling and coming to an end, and is due to be replaced by different countries with different systems. Now, one way of dealing with this is to spew as much misinformation and propaganda as possible, and that is exactly what is happening in the West. However, if you can see through this and view it for what it really is, then it shouldn't really have an effect on you. So, although there was a lot of bad press about China, especially during the peak of the pandemic, I wasn't about to let some news outlets' bias affect or influence a decision about my own personal life.
Usually there's a lot of things that go into moving to another country, but I wanted to know what the main factor was for them moving to China.
Well, the main factor that made me come back is the love for China, because I believe that if a country leaves you outside for 2 years, for more than 2 years actually, you're like, no, like you feel betrayed, and I felt betrayed. But the love for China, the love for Chinese people made me like resist, and I have to go back. Absolutely. And also, I have to write 2 theses for graduating. I have to do 2 internships for graduating. Otherwise, I cannot graduate. So it was like a no-brainer. I have to come back to China.
When I told my friends I was moving to China, most of them thought that was a crazy idea, and they didn't understand why. So I wanted to pose the same question to these people, especially during this time, to see how their friends and family responded to their decision to move to China.
Actually, both family and friends gave us very much support from the beginning. Knowing what a big chance this would be, they motivated us to pursue our goals and to gain as much experience as possible on this journey.
Having this kind of support and the possibility to come back at any point in time, we had the confidence to take this step, though it was hard to say goodbye.
Of course, people's reactions when I told them that I was moving here were interesting to say the least. I have friends from all walks of life and with different perspectives on pretty much everything. Unfortunately, some people aren't as clued into the world and how it works as perhaps some other people are. So some responses were negative, such as, "Oh, I've heard it's really dangerous over there." But on the contrary, of course, I had some very positive reactions as well.
Okay, well, my parents supported me like both financially and mentally, because they know that China is the right thing for me. So this is why they are like pretty much supportive, and my family, like the rest of my family, they were also pretty much supportive. Of course, it's not like a surprise for them because I'm now 22 and I came to China when I was 17. So probably the first time was pretty much a surprise for everyone, even for friends and people in general in my city. But now it's like they already know that China is part of my life. So yes, they didn't like really influence me. Because this is my decision. Even though they would say, "Oh, don't go to China," I would do that anyway. So yeah, there is no way anyone is going to influence me.
When I moved to China, it wasn't really that hard. It was a normal period of time. I showed up and started my life. But obviously things have changed, and moving during the pandemic is a lot of work. So I asked them what was the biggest hurdle or problem when it came to moving to China.
Getting the visa took nearly half a year for me, and the process was terrible and confusing. There was a document called PU letter, and still until today I do not know what those two letters PU stand for. Even on that day of my flight, I did not know if I filled out all documents correctly and if I would receive all green codes to board the plane in time.
After arriving in China, we encountered some reservation against foreigners because we were, at least in their beliefs, bringing the virus to China.
I believe that the hardest part is having to quarantine because I had to quarantine for 10 days, 1 month, more than 1 month ago actually, but then it was like the 7th day and the hotel told us like there is a positive case here in our hotel, so you need to stay more. So we ended up staying 14 days in quarantine, and so of course we were all upset because we believe that was a lie. Because if for example you need to stay more days because of someone resulting positive to COVID, the Chinese government will pay the hotel for the days that you need to stay. So for example, I paid 10 days, and then the 4 days that I stayed more, those days were paid from the Chinese government. So we all believe that the hotel made all of this up, and they tried to earn more money from the state. And so yes, we were pretty much upset about this, and I think this was the toughest part.
Now that they are all here, and some of them have lived for a longer period than others, I wanted to ask them the question of, is China what they expected? Is it worse, better? Just in general, what is their feeling now that they've been here for a little bit of time?
I think I didn't really bother myself of having too many expectations before coming to China. I just wanted to experience it by myself upon my arrival. And I definitely got not disappointed with the food. The variety of Chinese food is something you cannot imagine without really being here.
China is definitely different compared to my last stay. I remember taking the high-speed train was one of the most comfortable methods of transport I ever experienced. But currently I just circumvent it because of all those codes, test methods and registrations that differ in every city really make it a pain in the ass. But nonetheless, I embrace the positive aspects here, and when you're staying longer in the country, you have much more opportunities to experience wonderful cultures, wonderful sceneries and wonderful people.
Yes, actually China is not only what I expected, but is more, because right now there aren't like a lot of international people. So this means that there are a lot of, opportunities, job opportunities for you. Right now I'm not looking for a job because I'm still, I need to graduate in July 2023, but still in less than 2 months that I'm here, I received 3 job offers. So I believe this is crazy.
I also asked them, what would you say to people who are thinking of moving to China in the future?
To anyone thinking of moving to China and perhaps being sat on the fence right now, not knowing whether to come or to stay, I would say just go for it. You really do not have much to lose at all. It's a wonderful place. Come and see it for yourself.
To people that want to move to China, I would say yes, 100% do it. And if you want, if you have any question, please reach out to me. I will be so happy to help you if I can, of course. And do it, but remember to learn Chinese, because Chinese is what opens the door for you, and it's something that allows you to, connect with Chinese people. So yes, definitely do it, but consider learning the language.
It will take some time to get used to this new culture, and especially right now there will be constantly new challenges coming up. But in the same time, you will gain unique experiences and friendships that prove that there's more than our differences.
As you can see from these interviews, everybody moves for different reasons. Whether it's work or studying or relationships, most people move based on their own personal decisions. This is something that I think we have to remember when we listen to the news, whether it's positive or negative, that we have to remember that it's a personal decision. You shouldn't be influenced by outside forces, and you should really do a lot of research before you move somewhere. I was a little bit stupid and just got on a plane and came here without knowing much about China. But I think in today's environment, it's important to look at both sides. There are pros and cons of every country and every place that you might live in the future. So do your research. One way that you can kind of lean away from the bias of negative news is to try and find independent creators who are here in the country talking about their personal experience. Like I said, many people have left, and so that is becoming harder and harder, but there are still plenty of people like these YouTubers that I just introduced you to today who are making content, who are talking about their life here and giving an on-the-ground experience. Whether you decide to move to China or not is obviously up to you, but remember that there are two sides to every story. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Also check out the other channels because they are putting out content about life in China and about their adventure here. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.